Thank you everybody for coming along tonight. I'm sorry I won't use the microphone because I do have a loud voice anyway. So unfortunately I didn't have any audio visual, so I'm going to have to read a couple of notes because there's a little bit of data in a very interesting sector of the market. So thank you for making your way out here on a cold wintry Melbourne night to North Melbourne to talk about what's probably a pretty dry topic for anyone not involved in small business. But for those of us involved in small medium enterprise, it's extremely vital, and in fact our livelihoods depend on it. Tonight the topic is ideas for making business easier in Australia. So when Daniel came out and had a coffee with me in Hawthorne to talk about this, he asked the following question: what can government do to make life easier for small medium enterprise, or SMEs? My initial instinct and gut response, coming from a small business family, was get the hell out of the way. And that'd be your standard response from most small medium enterprises. I actually spoke to a couple of guys before, and I guarantee that probably sounds well with them as well. But then when you actually think about it a little bit more deeply, and you sit there and wonder what can government do, you start to think, well, actually we need a solid level of support from government from a small medium point of view on a number of fronts if we're going to play our part in creating a thriving Australian economy with a fair and equitable society. Now, that's a very grandiose statement to say that small business can create a fair and equitable society, but please allow me to present the case tonight. I'm going to start by telling you a story. I love telling stories and using analogies. So I'm going to start with a story that I think pretty much sums up the greater role the small business can play when it comes to Australian society. This story starts with a young family in a war-torn nation. Their country had been decimated by years of oppression and martial law. This young family makes their way to Indonesia, where they add to their family with another baby. But Indonesia doesn't want them there, so they chase them out of the country, where they end up back in their homeland. The war's now over back in their homeland, but the country hasn't recovered. There's no work, there's no opportunity for this family, so they do the only thing they can think of, and that's to get on a boat and come to Australia. They don't speak English, they don't know much about Australia, other than that it's probably warm and pretty friendly from what they understand. On the boat to Australia, their son turns 13, and he doesn't really know why he's going to this other country he doesn't know anything about. He was born during the darkest days of the war and had barely known his father for the first half of his life, and in fact for most of his life he'd been dragged from country to country. What do you think happened when he hit Australian waters? Well, I can tell you it was 1957, and they were welcomed into Australia with open arms. This was the year when Australia welcomed immigration. The purpose of this ambitious immigration program was to meet labour shortages, protect Australia from external threat, and to create prosperity. It sounds pretty promising and exciting, doesn't it? Especially at the moment. Well, that 13-year-old boy went on to be one of the founding members of the iconic Australian brand 40 Wigs. And he also happens to be my father. He arrived in Australia speaking no English, having no real consistent form of education, and yet managed to help build a company that currently has 98% total awareness in Australia. Why am I giving you that information? Because, well, I want you to understand the background and mindset of just one story that is replicated hundreds of thousands of times across all states and territories of Australia. It's an insight into why Australia has a culture of hard-working SMEs, and in many cases it can be traced back to a migrant influence and wanting a better life. That's my story. It's a common story, and it's relevant for SMEs. So, I want to now talk about the current global economic landscape and how it's changing. So, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'm an employee of a company, one. I'm a non-executive director of another company. I am a sole director and shareholder of a non-trading entity, and I've also got a trading ABN as an individual relating to yet another business interest. That's 3 income streams, and one that'll hopefully become an income stream. I don't tell you this to say, look at me, I'm a mover and shaker, I've got all these companies going. I'm just telling you it because it's the reality of the modern Australian economy. Multiple business interests, multiple income streams, and multiple irons in the fire that could be ready at any time. Again, this story is common and becoming more common around the globe. In the UK, it's forecast that next year, 2016, that next year there will be more people self-employed than work in the public sector. That is a massive shift when you think about it in job focus and financial motivation. In fact, 2/3 of the 1.1 million new jobs that have been created in the UK since 2008 are self-employed. That's coming to Australia. It's happening right now. It's happening in America. It's happening around the world. People that worked in corporations previously are employing themselves. People that worked in factories are now employing themselves. So, I got asked a couple of times tonight actually, what defines, Sophie asked me, how do you define the various levels of business? We talk about SMEs, large business, etc., etc. Well, in June 2014, there were 2.1 million active trading businesses in Australia. 96.2% of them are deemed to be micro, which means 0 to 5 employees, or 0 to 4 employees, sorry. 3.2% are small, that's 5 to 19, and 0.5% is called medium, 20 to 199 employees. Large is 0.1% of all companies in Australia, that's 200 plus. The vast majority of all businesses, just shy of 63%, are actually micro businesses that employ no people other than the person that owns the business themselves. That equates to roughly 1.2 million self-employed business owners in Australia, 79% of which their household income is derived from that business. The current small business concessions in the federal budget are fairly squarely aimed at that segment of the market. The 0 to 4%, or really the zero ownership, the one person in the business. And I think they've gone some way towards it, but they've fallen quite short of the mark, and I'll tell you why in a second. A large percentage of those, though, are in construction, hence the reason nicknamed Tony's Tradies, because these are people that you know, you employ them to be your plumber, you employ them to be your carpenter, these are the people that work for themselves. The ATO's, well, yesterday, the Inspector General of Taxation's report stated that the rate of tax debt in the micro business segment is escalating at a frightening rate. The ATO's debt from small business is increased by $1 billion every year from 2010 to 2013. And in the financial year of 2013-2014, the debt increased, this is increased, not the total debt, the debt increased $2 billion in small business. 75% of the small business collectible debt was in the $0 to $500,000 turnover range, so the micros. Increasing tax debt in small business shows an underlying decay in business health and sets off alarm bells for what could be ahead of us if consumer confidence dips too sharply. This suggests to me that you need to do more than just cut tax rates and give incentives for spending of up to $20,000 on business assets, although that is actually a very good start. So let's look more closely at the typical life of a small business. I love using analogies, so I'm not sure, does anyone put your hand on if you remember a TV show in the 90s called Married with Children? There we go, yeah, at the back as well. It was the story of a down on his luck women's shoe salesman, Al Bundy, and his completely dysfunctional family. In the opening sequence of each episode, Al Bundy would be sitting in the centre of his couch in his living room as each member of his family would take money from him. First came his son, then came his daughter, then came his wife, and I'm not looking at you for any particular reason. And then finally his dog came along and took another bit of money in his hand, leaving him with virtually nothing. That is an accurate depiction of a small business owner. Am I right, guys? Absolutely. You want to start a business? Well, there'll be ASIC fees, accounting fees, legal fees. You want to open up a physical location? Well, how about we whack some of the highest commercial rents in the world on you? You want to put a sign out the front? Well, you're going to need to pay for a local council permit to put that sign up. You want to play some music in your store or in your business? That's going to be a licence fee to the APRA. You want to turn the lights on? Well, let's talk about the ever-increasing electricity bills. You want to open the front doors to the public? Insurance, you need your public liability along with everything else there as well, that's another fee. You want people to serve your customers. Let's talk about wages, superannuation, pay-as-you-go tax, payroll tax if you're big enough. It just keeps going on and on and on. Everywhere you turn as a small business owner, there's someone putting their hand out asking for a little bit more. Yet you ask your local council to cut back a tree that's damaging your building, and 18 months later there's no action. Not that I'm actually bitter about that at all. I know many examples of SMEs that literally pay to be in business. I've seen it happen within our business, I've seen it happen with friends, I've seen it happen with family. They are they consistently lose money year on year on year. They whittle away at their personal savings until eventually someone comes along and buys them for $1.50 or they declare bankruptcy. I also know of businesses that currently turn over more than $4 million a year, and yet the owner takes home less than $100,000 themselves that year. $4 million to take home less than $100,000 a year. You could argue they'd be better off shutting their doors and working for someone else. You could argue that they could go and seek some form of government welfare, but they won't. They never ever will. Because they live for hope. They live for the possibility that their idea will pay off, that the market will turn, that they'll make it a success. The small business owner is generally the most optimistic person you'll come across. They may moan about the state of the market every time you see them. But what they'll do have is they have a deep down desire and a belief in themselves that's truly remarkable. So tonight is about ideas and concepts. I'll get into my ideas and concepts. I want to change personally the economic debate in the papers when we talk about it from being about household budgets. That's completely wrong. It's not a household. A household doesn't make you money. A household doesn't produce an income other than that when you go out to work. We need to start talking about it or using as a point of reference that we're a small business or an SME. Firstly, people. We need to invest in our people. That's what small business does. In small business, the vast majority of your success depends on the quality of the team around you. Therefore, investing in them is an absolute necessity. Richard Branson famously once said, the traditional company focus is your shareholders first, your customers second, your staff third. He rewrote that, Richard Branson. It became a success. I'm sure you've all heard of him. He changed it around and said, number one is your staff. Because if you do the right thing by your staff, they look after your customers. And if they do the right thing by your customers, they look after your shareholders. So you invest in your people first and you put them first. So how does that work with government? It equates to investing in education and training. On a recent trip to the Netherlands, I sat with a family member. And he teaches a course at university. It's pretty common there. It's called an entrepreneur's course. We've got them starting to come into university here, but it's certainly not the mainstream. What they do in the Netherlands is that every student must start a business at the beginning of the year. They must run the business for the course of the year and they must close it regardless of how well it's going at the end of the year. So what do they learn? They learn how to start a business and they learn how to wind up a business. Now think of the other thing they don't do is they don't tell them how to run the business, because by the time it's written in a textbook, it's now obsolete in the world of business. And I've got a couple of very big businessmen over the years in front of me that know exactly how true that statement is. They provided advice, guidance and mentorship throughout the year. But the only things they teach them are the legal requirements on starting and closing that business. The rest of it, go for your life as long as you're within the law. Think of the advantage these Dutch students have over our Australian students. Before they even go into the workforce, they've learnt how to create, run and wind up a company. And then they go out to the workforce. Imagine the sort of employees they're giving some of the businesses over there. I personally would like to see us, and might be contentious, I personally would like to see us start entrepreneurs courses in a very small scale at primary school level. It sounds strange, but I've got a story that doesn't paint me in a good light. So for those of you that are socially pragmatic, please block your ears a little bit at the moment, because I was only 9 years old at the time. I was sent out by the school to sell charity chocolates. We all did it. $2.50 was the chocolate at the time when I was there. I'm sure some of the others was different prices. I went out and I sold them for $3 as a 9-year-old. It's a true story. I reinvested my profits back into more charity chocolate. I got other kids to start doing the same thing, and with their profits they bought more of my charity chocolate. So it's really no shock I went into franchising with my family business. When they called my parents because one of the kids got caught out, my father said I can't even be angry with him because that's what I do on a daily basis with my retail business. But they took me out to each of the places that I'd sold the charity chocolate for 50 cents extra, and they made me offer to give it back and own up to what I'd done. Guess how many people made me pay back the 50 cents? No. Not one. They were happy, and I learned a very valuable lesson, which was I understood the profit margin, but then there's a social responsibility within business as well, and within charity. Sales. What is it that Australia offers the world? We talk about it non-stop. What is our product? Where are we going to get the money from? I mean, we can regurgitate our own money amongst ourselves, but where are we going to be relevant on the international market? Let's talk about the fact that we've got these amazing natural resources that have been leveraged and maximised over the most recent decades. But the global appetite for these resources is changing. So what's the global trend? Renewable energies, very topical at the moment. Food production, something that should be on the agenda far more regularly than it is at the moment. Research and development, something that's very close to my heart. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Design, we've got a couple of guys that do interior design and marketing as well. Design is another area where Australia is strong. So Australia has a natural competitive advantage when it comes to sun, wind and waves. So where is our investment in these industries? Where's the opportunity for some bright spark, and I'm sorry about that pun, to come up with a more efficient, more effective way to harness renewable energy? Food production. Again, our competitive advantage is our access and availability to farmland. Where is our sustained investment and support of food production, both locally and for our Asian neighbours who are crying out for a steady supply of protein-rich foods? R&D. And I'm going to upset a few people with what I say now. I'm sad to say it, but by regularly travelling the world for business, I can tell you it is going to be very, very hard for Australia to ever create a manufacturing division of any note ever again. And John, I'm sure you don't mind me using you. This is Mr. Dairybell, the man that started Dairybell in Australia and recently sold it as well. He can tell you, if you have a beer later, ask him just how hard it is to be a manufacturer in Australia today. Unless we completely change our economy and social values, which I don't want us to do, we don't want to do. However, the world, and my world, is crying out for innovation and R&D. Australians are highly regarded in this field and are regularly poached by overseas companies to undertake their work offshore, where we, as a country, see no net benefit. For example, in 3 weeks, I fly to the USA to meet a Spanish scientist to talk about a project that requires input of a Canadian R&D company, as well as getting componentry from Italy, Germany and South Africa, to be assembled in China, all so that I can get the sole rights to the Australian distribution that will eventually make most of us money back in the USA anyway. That's the reality of the business world we live in today. That's where we're going. I yearn for the day that when I walk the trades halls of the world, when I go to Cologne, when I go to Las Vegas, to all the trade shows, that I'll be able to walk past and visit some of Australia's R&D companies. They don't exist, they're not out there. We're not even playing in the scene. Watching innovation and inspiration come from our country, not having to pay the middleman, or play the middleman, for all of these overseas companies. Speaking of playing the middleman, and Daniel, I know you'll like this point, there is another opportunity for Australians. We're loved and respected across the world and are virtually given unrestricted access no matter where we go. We are no real threat to any region as we're so far away. Therefore, where is the focus of training international intermediaries and diplomats? Why shouldn't we aim to have a seat at every major global trade table, if only to act as impartial adjudicators? Expenses. This is a big one. What expenses are essential to doing business in Australia? Where can we cut back without hurting our culture and in turn without hurting our bottom line? A business must invest in sales in order to ensure it can continue to maintain this level of expenses, of which the majority should be focused on continually developing its product and marketing to attract more customers. If a business spends its entire time worrying about cutting costs, it actually harms its ability to make sales in the long run. 40 Winks grew, the biggest it ever grew to be the beast it was in the early 1990s during the recession because it doubled its marketing investment. Everyone else retracted. 40 Winks doubled, 40 Winks bought the market. Australia didn't have a recession during the global financial crisis. We call it a global financial crisis. The rest of the world calls it a recession, by the way, or even virtually a depression. But we call it a global financial crisis. That's a bit telling. We continued to grow because we increased investment when it was needed. I'd go on about 40 Winks Hawthorn on that, but I won't bore you too much about it. But let's just say reinvestment helped build our local business as well. In 1 year, we were told we'd go broke because we spent so much money in our business in 2009 after the global financial crisis. In that year, we grew a 20-year-old business by 47% in 1 year, just by reinvesting. To further back up my contention, I refer to the IMF's mea culpa issued in January 2013 to the European nations. And funnily enough, that's actually still playing out right now when you read what's happening in Greece. They stated at the time that for every dollar saved in austerity measures, your economy would only be negatively impacted 50 cents. That was the statement they made. In January 2013, they said, sorry guys, the numbers are in. For every dollar you saved, your economy was negatively impacted $1.50. That's horrendous when you think of it. That led a lot of countries down a very, very bad path that's turned out to be, well, pretty tough to recover from some of them. That's not to say we shouldn't keep our eyes firmly on our expenses, because every small business owner will tell you if you don't manage your money effectively, you won't be in business for long. But by changing the nature of the economic debate from the point of view of a household budget to that of a small business, we start to speak in the daily language and experience of millions of Australians, and realistically an ever-increasing percentage of the global workforce. I'm going to steal an idea now from the Dutch. And again, no, I know you're... My mother's sitting here, she married a Dutchman, so she's shaking her head. If you want to invigorate an area, or reinvigorate an area or a region, and we're going to, Geelong comes up here, don't you worry about that. It's become downtrodden, then we need to create a localised minimal tax haven, or tax havens. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to give you an example. In 2008, in Amsterdam, the red light district was completely transformed when Dutch authorities implemented a project called Red Light Fashion Amsterdam. Has anyone heard of it before? It was in 2008. What they did was they offered a group of young Dutch designers a chance to live and work rent-free for a year in the former establishments of prostitutes right in the heart of Amsterdam. The project came about part due to rising concern among city councillors about the culture, or the gang culture and crime in the area. Amsterdam created new laws enabling the closure of establishments believed to be involved in criminal activity. Then the city bought 55 buildings from a former brothel baron. Imagine that, having that on the business card. 16 of these were handed over to the designers. In order to attract small businesses into depressed regions, we could create local minimal tax havens, where businesses operating within selected zones, operating within certain turnover limits, would pay a significantly reduced tax. This could potentially increase employment within the zone, as well as reinvigorate a depressed local community and inspire them again. I watched it happen through the UK. My sister's in the fashion world. She lived in Hackney. There are people in Hackney in England that is people get stabbed every day by 13-year-olds out the front. Yet there's a thriving community of designers in that area. Why? Because there are people sponsoring them in there. We need to create these communities in Melbourne. We need to create these communities in Sydney, Adelaide, and anywhere around the country. Why not Shepparton? A city on its knees. I've got a couple of other ideas that I've come across recently. I'm going to fire through them pretty quickly because I've taken up too much of your time. Having to pay quarterly tax instalments based on previous year's earnings can be a micro-business killer. My wife's nodding her head because she's dealt with this. As many people I talk to can attest, it chokes cash flow and it can be unrealistic in volatile markets. Surely there could be a way of paying your tax instalments based on revenue received in the previous quarter rather than the total year before. Raising the level of income a company must earn before having to complete BAS to $150,000 a year. Why that number? Well, two partners in a micro business can actually earn a good living, providing a service based upon their time and a small amount of materials at that level. Having either a lower entrepreneur's capital gains tax of 10% as it is in the UK or 0% as it is in New Zealand, payable by the owners only upon the time they sell their small business. Increasing the tax-free threshold on income tax to $24,000 a year for all employees in businesses with turnover less than $500,000 and fewer than 5 equivalent full-time employees. How about lowering the tax rate on distributed company profits or dividends to a maximum of 5% for all businesses with turnover less than $500,000 and fewer than 5 equivalent full-time employees? And again, another contentious one, especially in the current environment where the state government looks like it's going to run out of money in all states because of what's happening at a federal level. Abolishing payroll tax, period. Whilst researching tonight's topic, I couldn't believe the number of bodies, entities, associations that currently exist around SMEs. I didn't know they existed. All these groups I'd never heard of, and all their ideas had never been centralised or harnessed. it got me thinking, where is the one central body of information that can be the first port of call for any aspiring new business owner? Where do you go to receive independent, impartial advice on exactly what is required in setting up a business and ensuring you're prepared for what is actually involved? Are governments funding short courses in setting up or winding down small businesses? Every piece of research around the world at the moment says that first-time small business owners that have the chance to learn key business principles and be coached or supported in the first 3 years of that new business have a significantly higher survival rate. I could talk about rent relief. I could talk about bank regulations for merchant facilities and transaction fees. However, I still believe that we need to allow some freedom for market to control their own destinies. I implore you, small business owners will find a way around any system you put up anyway. Therefore, while I finish on this note, I implore you to turn the discussion from fear and disaster to positivity and inspiration. Australians are resilient, Australians are innovative, and I'm going to quote John Williamson when I said they'll tie it up with wire just to keep the show on the road. That's very true today of small business owners. So, we've got to show them the road. We need to show them that our best times are always ahead of us. Because you must remember, today's corporate warrior or today's union organiser is tomorrow's small business owner. Thanks, guys.